Ladies and gentlemen, you are now tuning in to a new season of What's on Repeat. Of course, this is the first episode of 2022. We're your hosts, Josh, Kirk, and Brian. And we talk about new music we're into, specifically like albums and singles. And I'm glad that for those of you who have been with us since we began, thank you for tuning in once again. But for those of you who are new to ChannelBK, welcome to the show, is what I would say.
Thank you for welcoming everyone to ChannelBK. Hello. Also, I want to go off of that too. When you say like welcome back, if you have been watching What's on Repeat, we're changing it up now. Josh and I have had a lot of conversations over the past like 4 months about kind of what we want to do. The show is not drastically different. It's not like we're adding anything crazy or anything, but we decided to streamline the show and really make it more about the albums we have legitimately really been listening to. And we've also kind of cut out the anticipated artists because that kind of comes with our best singles at the time. And then we're not going to do concerts. Maybe over time we might add it or something. Maybe we'll do our own separate thing about concerts. Who knows? We'll get to that another day. But we are going to only do 2 singles each, and then we're going to do 3 albums each. So it's going to be a lot more of a quicker video, but it's also going to be a more in-depth one. And let me just say, other than the singles for Josh, because I haven't listened to his singles, him and I are going to be able to talk about all 6 albums, which is crazy because I think all 6 of the albums that we're going to talk about are also albums that I really like. The ones that I'm going to talk about, I know it's kind of like here, and then one of them's a little here, and then one's back up, but it's okay because I don't think he hates the one album that we're going to talk about that I like more than him. But yeah, I mean, do you want to go first with singles, or do you want me to go first?
I think I'm pretty comfortable going first myself.
Okay, so let's, for 2022, What's on Repeat, Season 3, what are your 2 singles that you've been listening to?
So, yeah, I would say I'm very proud of myself in that the 2 singles I'm going to talk about, you know how on Spotify there's that whole on repeat playlist?
Yes.
So basically on my Spotify on repeat playlist, the 2 songs at the top right now are the 2 singles I'm going to talk about. So yeah, I've been legit. So the first song is from a band that I've known for a long time, and I have a kind of interesting backstory with that I'll get into as I discuss this new single they put out. The song is called Wasted, and it's from a band known as Jukebox the Ghost. And it also has a vocal feature, and also probably some writing credits as well from Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness. I have no idea how to say that name. Yeah, that last name, that is. But sort of, I definitely have a little bit of history with this band in that I told Brian this when I talked about one of the concerts I went to back in September, that I've been reviewing albums for over a decade now. And the very first band that I got attention from actual music people for reviewing was Jukebox the Ghost. Their current record at the time was Safe Travels, came out in 2012. And of course, I reviewed it very positively, and it caught the attention of the band and also the label they were signed to at the time, Yep Rock Records. And ever since then, me and my parents have actually known the people from Yep Rock Records pretty well, in terms of they've been sending us music all these years, and we even got to attend a couple of Yep Rock related events that where we got to see like some of the artists on their label like play live a few nights. So that was really cool. So this band used to be on that label. They signed to a different label in the mid 2010s, and then eventually got dropped, and then they kind of have been self-releasing a lot of their stuff lately. And so this is kind of me returning to my roots a little bit with this band. So their early 2010s output, I think is held up very well. Like their 2010 album, Everything Under the Sun, I think is, in my opinion, their best album, where they have this very unique sound. It's like some indie rock and power pop, but also like there's a bit of like prog rock in some of what they do, and in terms of like some of the riffs and like the complexities and the melodies and the way they like layer guitars and and they use like their music is like very rich in pianos, for sure. So they definitely have that whole Ben Foldsy kind of piano rock thing going on too. Um, as they progressed over time, the production has become a little more slick and polished in their music, which uh, I don't, I don't necessarily have a problem with them, kind of streamlining their sound, given that, in the past few years, they have come out with a few songs here and there that I definitely really like. But for whatever reason, I just kind of became a little less interested in what they were doing because, like, their music started to become maybe a little less unique and everything. Even though I've always really liked this band and think that they're very talented guys. But hearing, I don't know, something about this new single was like, it definitely very much is a lot like what they've been doing lately, but it has sort of like uh, that sort of charm that I kind of missed from the older jukebox records, where it's like the melodies are fun and kind of quaint. It's got this like sort of 80s, it's like kind of an 80s style power ballad in a way, and it kind of reminds me of Tears for Fears, especially since like Tears for Fears' most well-known song, Everyone Wants to Rule the World, has that whole do 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 do, like, yeah, and this song has that sort of pulsating rhythm to it, and like I think the vocals are really good from both Ben Thornwell, who's like one of the lead songwriters and singers in the band, and like Andrew I thought sounded great on it too. And I'm really hoping that, considering how much I really like this song, uh, that I'm really hoping this new record is like a culmination of like all the things I really like about this band, and also like kind of like the older stuff, which I would say, like Everything Under the Sun and Safe Travels are the ones I recommend the most. Their 2008 debut, Let Live and Let Ghosts, I think is really good too. And like, and that sort of like, so I'm hoping that sort of mixed with kind of what they've been doing lately, uh, kind of find some greater focus. And the new album's called Cheers. Um, at the moment, we don't really know when it's coming out, but I'm definitely looking forward to it because, yeah, I really liked this song. My next track, though, I think is kind of an obvious pick considering the kind of music I like and the fact that I've talked about this artist quite a bit in the last two episodes, but there are a couple of reasons why I do want to talk about this song. One is that it kind of feels like a one-off to me, but like a really good one-off. And two, it is one I have been going back to, so that's why I'm talking about it here. But it's the new Lucy Dacus single, "Kissing Lessons." So clearly, this is a leftover from the home video sessions, but it is definitely. I kind of understand why Lucy did not include this song on the album because, like, in a weird way, it feels a little more upbeat and bittersweet than a lot of what's on that record. Where, like, I mean, even the most sort of like straight ahead, just like bops, like Brando or Hot and Heavy, still have this like underlying melancholy to them. And not that this song doesn't have any of that either. It's definitely a very revealing song about, yeah, I've heard her. I already sort of knew that she had written this song before she put it out, because like in a couple of interviews she had stated that there was a song she wrote about this girl she had a crush on in like maybe high school or something like that, and she would like come over to her house and they would like practice kissing and everything. And obviously, the song is about kind of the impact it had on Lucy, kind of like the pros and cons of it all. And it's just like this very short, touching, and it has a great bop that has a great drive to it. I think her vocals are really good, and it's definitely a song that doesn't overstay its welcome, and definitely is this is not really new territory for Lucy, but it definitely is. It once again shows how special the songwriter she really is. And yeah, I definitely Stand By Home Video is, out of all the like young women in indie that like had breakout albums in like 2021, Lucy was the one that I think definitely had the best writing, and like left the like definitely left the biggest impression on me out of all of them. And yeah, uh, really not much more I can say. Really good song.
I mean, I do agree with you about the album part. I definitely think, you know me with a lot of the, like, we've talked about it on the show a billion times about the whole like indie rock singer-songwriter girls. And Lucy is definitely in the top tier for me. Like, she's someone, I don't love her, but like, I definitely think what she does is better than a lot of the women that are in that kind of lane, even men too. Like, she kind of owns a lot of that. She's definitely more in that top tier. So I have to listen to the song. I haven't gotten
Oh yeah, and yeah, I'd say if Mark of Spectrum Pulse were in this conversation now, he'd definitely be in agreement, because out of all these like artists in this lane that have put out breakout albums this year, he was definitely the most positive towards Lucy, which positive towards Lucy, which is definitely very cool. That yeah, we have one artist in this camp that we both agree on.
For sure. But that's good. So I'll have to go listen to that. I didn't realize if it was like a Lucy. Sometimes Lucy's are good. Sometimes, you kind of get mad, you want more music, but Lucy's are just as good. A Lucy Dacus, the pun and the wordplay. Thank you so much, Josh. So I had two singles. Literally today, one of them changed because I said there's no way that I can do the other one, because the single today that I chose, breaking news, I think may be my favorite single so far this year. But we'll get to that second. So the first song, I think, is a song that is not a song I have to talk too much about, not because it's bad, but because my feelings on it are more so towards the album. It's an album that's actually going to be out very soon, and it's a pup song. They've been putting out a lot of singles, but the one I chose is Matilda. I know I brought it up on the show, and I brought it up with Josh in private before. Morbid Stuff, I think, was like a lightning in the bottle situation. I loved The Dream Is Over. I know I like that album more than a lot of people did, but Morbid Stuff, I think I'm in agreement with Josh. Like, that album's phenomenal. That was my favorite album of 2019. I love it. Yeah. This album cycle has not been making me as excited. I really love that they're experimenting. I think they're doing really fascinating things. I think the whole concept of it is cool. A lot of the songs have not been...
do you think don't you think that album name, The Unraveling of Pup the Band, sounds a little shit posty to you? I think so.
It does. I mean, it kind of goes with their brand. Like, that's a lot of like what their music is written like, and their music videos have been very much like that lately too, with the whole Steve Jobs stuff. Yeah, the whole meta commentary, and they're kind of doing this whole like Steve Jobs Apple thing. There's a lot going on, and I think all the songs up until this point have either been fine, or they've been what, like the robot makes a love song, I think, is a fascinating idea. And the song is actually written pretty well. It just doesn't do that much for me. But Matilda, I think, it does new stuff for Pup. Like, it's not just because it's like a big rah song, but it does some soft elements really well. I think the songwriting on this for a song about a guitar is kind of beautiful. Like, it's really beautiful, and it's so crazy to me. And I love it. Incorporates a lot of what Pup does really well, but it definitely fits in kind of the new aesthetic that they're doing, which, like we were talking about, there's a little more 808 stuff. I feel like they're doing this kind of album seems a lot more like a concept album, which again, I think good for them. Like, even though it's not for me completely, a lot of these singles, I'm still excited because Pup is a really great band, and it's cool to see that they're going in a more innovative direction. This was the first single of theirs that, like, I listened to it and I didn't either go, okay, or I didn't go, that's fine. Like, I actually really like this song. And it's, when you know what it's about, it's like brilliant how well the songwriting is. And you're like, wow, this is emotional. And it's a song about a guitar, and the whole storyline and how many memories, they've made. It's incredible. And it just sounds kind of like that classic Pup with a little added stuff in there. So really good song.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I will just sort of add that it makes sense they're experimenting, given the producer they're working with this time around is Peter Cadis, who's like done a lot of work with the National and Interpol,
Okay.
and he actually did produce one of Jukebox the Ghost's albums. He produced Everything Under the Sun.
Okay.
So yeah, he had a huge hand in producing that one.
Okay, so that makes sense. So, even if it's not an album that I fully love, I'm excited, and I hope, Pup learns some cool stuff from this, and, them doing something like this, I think, is inventive for a band like them. So good for them. Shout out to them. The next single, I was burned by their last album.
I am same here.
And let me just tell you, Arcade Fire is fucking back. The Lightning Part 1 and 2. I actually heard this song first on the radio because I didn't listen to it up until this point. And the moment it came on, I was like, okay, so sonically, I'm already into it. I'm like, okay, so, but let's
It definitely
hear.
sounds kind of like the Suburbs era a
Yes.
little bit.
It honestly sounds like the first two songs off of the Suburbs smushed together, because the first part of it is like, very like slow, and it's like upbeat
And
let
epic.
me let me tell you, when that switches and the second half of the song comes on, I literally get chills every single time. This song, so this was a really good point you made about Jukebox the Ghost. You made a good point about how you're like, you feel like their upcoming album is going to be kind of like this is who we are. I think Arcade Fire, and it makes me nervous because here's the thing. I don't think every song on Everything Now was bad. It just was not a good album. I think there's parts of it that are good, and I think there's parts to it that they did a decent job with. But overall, I was very disappointed with that album.
Oh yeah, God, that album traumatized me.
Oh my goodness, that's dark. This song makes me feel like this album is gonna be like, we're Arcade Fire. We're gonna do a little splash of Funeral, which, spoiler, is gonna be my next classic album review. So I felt like this was a good tie-in of, like, I was excited for Arcade Fire because I was listening to Funeral. Now we're gonna get a new album, but it seems like they're kind of gonna do like a little bit of Neon Bible, Funeral, Suburbs, Reflector, Everything Now, and then they're gonna culminate it in this album, which is gonna be such a short album. And there's not that many songs, but like each song has like movements, and it's like two songs put together, and it's like, if they can pull it off, and it sounds just as good as this single or singles, because it is two songs, right? But it's like a combined song. This may be one of the top albums of the year, because this song vocally, and just the way it builds, and just the way Win and performs it, and Regine, and just the way the band performs, and there's so many elements. And again, I was just listening to Funeral to prepare for the review, and I'm just listening and I hear the bells, and when the fast part starts and the piano's like da 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 da, I'm like, oh my god, like I get so giddy. This song is incredible. Like this is my top contender right now for single of the year. Like this song made me be like, okay, we kind of went down a dark path. You know, I know not everyone liked Reflector, but I feel like Reflector was an album where I don't think people thought it was trash. It was just, they could have done a little better. But then they're like, well, let's go into all of that on Everything Now. And those results were very mixed. I think they're now like, okay, we're going to kind of go back to sort of that indie rock sound with the classic instrumentation. We're doing what we do best. The music video is great too for it. And it just sounds like you said, there's so much of the Suburbs vibe from it.
Oh, yeah. And I will say, like that transition of like the title track for the Suburbs into Ready to Start, easily one of my favorite transitions ever, like in any sort of music.
And that's how The Lightning sounds too. That's what I thought of, was those two songs, because the way it goes from part one and it's like and it goes into this fucking banger. I'm like, shit, like this song's great. This is a phenomenal song. Arcade Fire, please do not disappoint me with this album.
Oh yeah, I definitely feel the same way. Like, I definitely, there was almost a period in my life where I'm like, you know, where I kind of felt like, do I really have a reason to be to have faith in Arcade Fire? But obviously, yeah, it definitely took some point in my life to be like, you know what? They haven't put out an album in a while. The chances are they've probably, they've probably had a little more time to really sort of take their time with the music. And
the songwriting is a lot stronger on this too. Like it sounds like the album is going to be a lot of big things, because the first half of the album is called like an I, and the second half is we. So clearly it's going to be a big album about, I'm assuming it's going to be something about how we're all one, we should all work together, all that sort of stuff. And listening to the last album and thinking of Creature Comfort, which is not a bad song, but like the way that the song is like, yeah, we saved someone's life because they listened to our music. It kind of is like,
yeah.
But I think that album is just we'll just let it go and we'll just forget it happened. And like you said, I think they took a lot of time off, and I think they're kind of honing back in. And I think this is going to be kind of a universal, we're going to kind of throw what we've done, and this is going to be who Arcade Fire is. And if it is, again, Everything Now is totally not trash. If they pull the good stuff from Everything Now and kind of form it into this album much better, it's going to be a great album. So I can talk about this song and keep saying how much of a banger it is. So yes, that is my two singles of the year. But ladies and gentlemen, we got albums to freaking talk about. So let's go. We got 6 juicy meeting records that all we're fans of. Besides the one, I know Josh is a little lukewarm on one of mine, but for the most part, we are a fan of all of ours. So I'm going to just get into the shortest one, which when I think about it, the Arcade Fire song is a fifth of the length of this album, which is the new Earl Sweatshirt album, Sick. I have to say it like how it's spelled, sick, with an exclamation point. We were talking last year about 2010. And it seemed like what Earl was doing was, it felt like he was still in that some rap songs vibe, but putting out something that had a lot more life to it. I think he was performing much differently. And guess what? That's what the album turned out to be. I do think the second half, there's a few moments that I feel like we were talking about this, where the flow of the album is very strange because, excuse me, it starts with a lot of short songs. Then we get to the beefy songs with the 2 features, and then it kind of gets short again, and it sort of throws you for a loop. But Old Friend phenomenal way to come back to Earl. It is, I love the sound of this song. It is just a phenomenal entrance. 2010, again, is a phenomenal single. I love it. Sick is a good song. Vision, though, the spaciness and just the laid backness of it. And Z Loopers just comes in and the boom, 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 with the keys. It's so, again, like this is Earl being like, I'm still in that some rap songs vibe, but I'm giving you production where it's not like, so what is going on? Like it's there's a lot of jazz on here, a lot of jazz samples, which the following song, Tabula Rasa, with our boys Arm and Hammer, is great. Like, oh, it is smooth. It literally is so smooth. And God, it just sounds phenomenal. I would probably say the other single, I like Lie a lot. Lie is probably one of my favorites. And then I think from 7 to 9, it's kind of like, it takes a couple dips here. Fire in the Hole, I think, is a phenomenal way to end the album, though. You know, it's good to hear Earl kind of back into a space where it feels like, you know, clearly he doesn't seem 100% out of whatever funk he's in, but it definitely feels like he's in a better place now. The EP, Feet of Clay, I was not a fan of. I was like, it felt very out there and it didn't feel like there was a clear direction. I felt like this album, there's so much more pop to the instrumentation. He's flowing like old Earl, where he's just kind of going and going. It feels like there's a lot more meat to these songs than his last album, because yeah, his last album was just super depressing. So it's nice to hear that there's a little bit of life. You know, he's still talking about really emotional stuff, but his upfrontness and just the way he's delivering is back to kind of what people are used to. And it's a good record. It's a solid record. I don't think it's better than some rap songs. I think that album kind of has the most perfect flow of anything he's put out, because I think that's kind of been my problem with his records if I didn't love them. But this record's great. I love it.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I will kind of say about this record. I will say I do very much prefer some rap songs in terms of like, I think for one, the flow of that album was a lot better. And like this one, like it's definitely an album I really like. That being said though, kind of the weird way in which it's structured, and maybe even at times some of the sort of half-baked ideas sort of really prevent me from loving this album the way I want to, even though I do agree with you that 2010 and like Fire in the Hole are like really good songs. And you know what these two albums remind me of in terms of the change and progression? The last two Danny Brown albums. Like,
yeah, from Atrocity X. Fuck. God damn, Josh. You fuck me, dude. That is fucking brilliant. I never fucking, holy shit.
oh yeah, I know.
Fuck, Josh. Holy crap. I'm literally, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That is brilliant.
Yeah. Which by the way, I did revisit Atrocity Exhibition just recently. That album really holds up, and like you think some rap songs is depressing. Atrocity Exhibition sounds like a horror movie. Like from the way those beats sound is just like, it's so creepy. And then just like a lot of his lyrics are like, yeah, it's similar to Earl. He was also really in the shit when writing those songs. But then the following album, you know what I'm saying, is like that one was a little more laid back, and it definitely, it didn't sound like he was like 100% out of like his own emotional funk, but definitely was more, just sounded a little more comfortable and in a better place in a way. And also the beats sounded a little more psychedelic, and it was just kind of this it was like this very low key yeah, more sort of like Danny's just sort of oddball, just more kind of his sort of kind of optimistic oddball side, whereas Atrocity Exhibition was just like him in his like really in like kind of a purgatory state a little bit.
That is literally the most genius thing I've heard. That is the greatest hot take. Holy shit, Josh, that was genius. Moving on, because now my mind is all over the place from how fucking brilliant that was. This is the album that I think Josh knows, though. Like, I definitely agree with him on this album with what he's saying, but I still like it more than him for like my own personal reasons. It's the new Alex Cameron with Oxy Music. The thing about this album that upsets me is I think it's not as showy as what we've seen from him. It is definitely not. I think that's why I liked it, because I think the way he performs this album, it's a lot more subtle, and he still has that smart ass attitude, and he's using these lyrics in such a unique way, but it's more streamlined until it gets to the last two songs, which I'm just going to be upfront right now. Pantoculture is probably the worst song I've heard all year, not because it's about that, it's because it sounds terrible. Sorry, Alex, not a fan. The last song, I think, kind of is okay. I think the second half of it is a lot better, but it just didn't work with me. But the rest of this album, it flowed. I loved it. Best Life, what a great way to start the album. I love the lyrics to this. Sarah Joe is a great follow-up, but let me tell you, one of the songs that I have had stuck in my head all fucking year. Will you fill my prescription, baby? Just to wait till I get my hands on you. That song is probably my favorite song of the year. Like, if I had to talk about legit songs, I love just the like, it's catchy, it's fun. The lyrics are actually like depressing and eerie, but they're also like really beautiful. Like, I love it. Hold the Line, I think, is a nice track. Breakdown is great. K-Hole, one of the best Alex Cameron singles. Like, I love this song. I just love.
Oh yeah, it's probably my favorite song from this album.
Boom, 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 boom. It's just so sensual, and like just the like, it's so great. And I love the music video, and the vibe to the song is just so well done. I love that song. It's great. And then Dead Eyes is a more kind of laid back song. It's a little quieter, a little darker. And then sadly, the following two tracks kind of end the album in a funky way, which upsets me, because I think if those last two songs were not what they were, or if one of them was a little bit more up in the album and it ended differently, I think I would have a different opinion. I still think it's a great album for what it did up until track 8 and even track 9, because track 9 I don't think is terrible. I just, that cancel culture thing, sonically, performance, no thank you. That is a big no from me. But it's as simple as that on that album. But now, yes, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting. I know you want to talk about the albums. I apologize.
but yeah, like, I definitely, I'm kind of, yeah, I am a little mixed on this album, even though some of the songs you mentioned, like Best Life, K-Hole, and like Prescription Refill, those are like some of the better songs on the album for me. And I sort of went into this album a little worried, because I hadn't really heard much of the singles, but like, I did see Anthony put multiple singles from this album like in the meh category, like in his like track roundup. And I was just sort of coming in not really knowing what to expect, even though I was definitely also excited for it, because I love the last two Alex Cameron albums. Like Miami Memory is definitely
great.
Is the one I definitely prefer over those two. But yeah, this album was really weird to me, and and yeah, I pretty much agree with you on cancel culture. Like, that song is bad. I wouldn't say it's the worst I've heard this year, considering I did listen to the new Oliver Tree, and I think that was a ride for sure. But
Yeehaw!
yeah, yeah, but yeah, no, yeah, that song is no. And yeah, I definitely don't think the last song needed to be like 6 minutes. It's kind of funny you say that the second half's a little better because the second half actually kind of bored me. Like it just felt really long. That refrain near the end, just I don't even remember it. And plus, Jason Williamson of like Sleaford Mods didn't need to be on there because like the moment he comes in, I'm like, huh? Like
Huh?
okay. I guess I guess we're doing a couple of weird genre crossovers with these last two songs.
Yeah.
And he didn't even bring Genesis Owusu in there, even though he's from Australia like he is.
You know what though, Josh? You want to talk about an album that makes us happy, that we agree on? Let's talk about Impera by Ghost. Hail Satan, am I right? I'm just kidding. I'm just
Hey.
This is an album that, in my opinion, so here's the thing, their last album, Prequel. So obviously it's a continuation, and that's kind of a big thing for Ghost. I was kind of with Josh. I think leading up to this album, I know Josh and I were kind of in the same place of like, we were kind of nervous because none of the singles were bad, but the singles were not like hitting us the way that a Ghost single hits us, right? Like you hear a Ghost single and you're like, fuck yes, like this is rad. So going into this album, I was a little nervous. And Prequel, I think, was a really good album, but I think what this album did, it was trying to do kind of what Prequel did. I think it did it better. And the analogy I use with Josh is this reminds me of the last two Clipping albums, whereas There Existed an Addiction to Blood had amazing singles. The final product was good. It was pretty good. The Vision of Bodies Being Burned. So I did not really care for a lot of the singles leading up to it. I think the body of work was much better. This is kind of my comparison. I think this album, personally, I think with Prequel, there were moments on there where I felt like it was a little dull, like with the big instrumental stuff. Some of it worked, some of it I was like, I felt like it was a little unnecessary. On here, I think what's done really well is they do such a good palette of some of what people are thinking is more of kind of that like pop arena rock that they're kind of getting into more so now. And then there's just great kind of metal stuff on it. Like I think Imperium's a good way to start the album. Kaisaron. God,
Kaisarion.
There we go. You said it better. Yeah, like that song has the energy of like their kind of pop rock, but it also has like this kind of evilness to it. And obviously this album is a little bit more not uplifting, but it's about the rise of the civilization after the kind of Black Plague storyline they had on Prequel. And then Spillways is probably one of my favorite hooks on a Ghost song in a while. I don't know it. I just know I don't know the words that well, and that's ironic that I said it's one of my favorite hooks. I just love the way it's performed, like the way it's like dun dun dun, boom, bum bum bum, na na na. I'm like every time I hear it, I'm like, yes. Call Me Little Sunshine. I legit liked when it first came out. I liked how creepy it was. It was slow. It was moody. It was something you haven't heard from Ghost in a while. Hunter's Moon. It's a hunter's moon. Like it's so theatrical and it's so over the top. Which gets to a song like 20s, which is a Hot Topic song. And Josh and I agree, we're into it. It's so corny, it's so goofy, but that's the point. That's the point of the song. It's over the top.
Yeah. And he's literally going, listen up, you motherfuckers.
Yeah, like when I first heard it, I rolled my eyes a little bit, but then I think the more I sat on it, I'm like, that's Ghost. Like if you don't like the song, you don't like the song. But I feel like the whole like, what are they doing? It's like this is kind of Ghost thing. They're theatrical. They're over the top. Like this is their thing, you
and
know?
also like one thing people don't understand about this song is that they're trying. This is a satire after all. Like the
Yeah.
fact that they're the fact that they're quoting a president that shall not be named in this video is clearly this is kind of an attack
Yeah.
on like so on something. And I mean, if you don't buy it, you don't buy it, but just like I kind of I feel like in my opinion this has been so far the most overanalyzed song of 2022. Like few songs have, there's few songs where I've heard such a huge vocal attack on that I've just been like, what are you doing, people? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like,
I think the hook is like so over the top, but it works the boom, 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 boom. Like this is Ghost. Like I don't get it. Like I get it. Like they're kind of in this different realm now, but they've always been over the top and big and lavish. Like that's their sound. Darkness at the Heart of My Love. When the hook first comes on, I immediately went. And then when it came back around and the rest of the instruments were in, I went from this to this. It's a pretty good song. It works. It works. Griftwood, I think, is great. I think the finale of this album is a really great way. Watcher in the Sky is probably the only song on here that, back to what you were saying about the Alex Cameron thing, I felt like that song was, sonically, it was cool. It felt a little repetitive, and it was like, I get it. There's a watcher in the sky. Like, I feel like that's repeated
funny
too
you
much.
say that. That's one of my favorite tracks on that album.
I do think sonically it's really good. I don't know what it is about that. Like at a certain point, I get it. There's a watcher in the sky, because it's a long song too.
Yeah,
But
if I had to pick my least favorite track, I kind of think the last song, as much as I really like it, it feels a little drawn out. Like the pacing is a little weird to me. Like so, but yeah, it's like even I'm kind of in a weird position with this album where my least favorite song kind of depends on my mood, but like whatever mood I'm in, I generally like all the songs on this album. Like even the interludes I think work pretty well into the album.
oh yeah, like again, unlike prequel, I think prequel, however you want to pronounce it. I think like you said, I think the flow of the album is a lot better structured. I think it never feels kind of like you're at a halt. Like it feels like it kind of moves and it flows and it kind of takes you on this journey. But yeah, I really love this album. I think this might be my favorite album of the year so far. I don't say that like I think it's amazing. I think this is just the best thing that's come out so far. But those are my albums, dude. Your 3 albums are really great as well. So I'm just gonna shut up and let you get into it so I can discuss with you.
Yeah, which I think that is a great the fact we're talking about Ghost is a great transition into my first album, because like we're keeping it in the spooky territory for this next album, and it's the newest Conway the Machine record, God Don't Make Mistakes. So I did not listen, I was not familiar at all with Griselda until 2020, which is kind of the case for I think a lot of people, because even though they've been around and Benny the Butcher, West Side Gun, and Conway the Machine had been coming out with all these mixtapes and everything since like the early 2010s, it was really 2020 where they were like a big topic of discussion among hip hop fans and writers. So my first Griselda album I listened to was Conway's album he put out that year, From a King to a God. Because like I had heard a lot of people praising that one and everything. It was good. I generally liked what it was doing in terms of like the beats and like what he was doing lyrically, and I really liked some of the features. But I don't remember a lot of that album for some reason. It was one of those albums where okay. It was good, but just I could tell you not much about it. And then, of course, he drops La Maquina in 2021, which saw him try to go for more of a trendier trap leaning sound. But in a weird way, even though I don't think that album is better than the one before it, there's at least more stuff I remember from that album. Like the song with Jid and Ludacris, Scatterbrain, that song's a banger. Like I definitely remember that one. And then and whereas like Benny, I did listen to his EP last year, and I kind of like with Conway, I thought it was good, but I don't really remember much of it. The two West Side albums from last year, I was not the biggest fan of like Hitler Wears Maze 8, Sincerely Adolf, is it just kind of felt like more of what you would expect from a Griselda album in general. But the side B record that followed it up, that album is like some of my usual issues with West Side do turn up on that album in terms of like structurally there are a few songs that feel a little bit awkward, and also I definitely think in terms of pacing it was maybe a bit too long, but that album like had I think really good like kind of big sounding production, really good verses, and like nearly all the features on that album were like awesome. um and I will say I went into this Conway album being like, okay, yeah, guess we're getting another Conway album that's happens to be on Eminem's Shady label. The first time I listened to this album, I was kind of went away from it the way I did with like nearly all the Griselda projects I had listened to up to that point of like, um, this is good. I can vibe with it. And then I hear more about what the album was actually about and everything. And I was like, whoa, there is some deep shit on this album that I clearly missed the first time I listened to it. So I listened to the album again. Holy shit, dude. Like this album is like not only is it easily the most I've ever like loved a Griselda project, but it's also like emotionally we kind of talked about other stuff that hits emotionally. This is definitely right up there. Like this is definitely it kind in a weird way it kind of has a lot in common with Atrocity Exhibition in terms of like the beats on this album are like some of the creepiest production I've heard in hip hop this year. Like,
But there's also like a lot of lush stuff too. Like there was legit a few times where I swear The Alchemist produced. And that was something I noticed on this album. Like I agree with you 100%. His last album was not bad. I don't remember a lot about it. And the one thing I remember a lot about this album is the production hit me a lot more. And there were times where it honestly felt like I was listening to like Haram, because Haram is creepy, but it has that lushness. And that's how I felt a lot on this album. I was kind of like, whoa, like this is pretty good.
yeah, like Piano Love was
Yeah.
clearly produced by The Alchemist because like the or like the opening track Locklow, just the
that was the track where I immediately went, I think this is going to be a much better album than his last album.
And then he even says in the song, it's spooky out here, like as like kind of a little ad lib, which I think is like perfect. And also like, you know, I feel like these kind of beats work really well with and another beat I want to highlight that caught me by surprise is Hit Boy's beat on Wild Chapters. Like it doesn't sound like what he's been doing with Nas lately. It sounds like it's kind of what you would expect from him, but like has this sort of eerie tone to it, and just like I have that whole like melody stuck in my head, and I think these kind of beats are perfect for what he talks about lyrically on this album. Is like there is a lot of pretty dark stuff on this album. Like the opening track's kind of about his yeah, like he opens up quite a bit about how he was like he was like shot in the head, and like that ended up giving him like Bell's palsy. So he has suffered pretty bad like gunshot wounds. And then there's the song Stressed, which is like, you know, I would say that's my, even though it's not one I've gone back to a lot because of how depressing it is. I think that maybe my favorite track, scratch that, Lockload may be my favorite track on the album, but like this one is like a close second in terms of like the emotional impact. Like you listen to him talk about how, his you listen to him talk about like his son's death and like his cousin's suicide, and there's even a point where he talks about how he was like abused as a child as well. So like some pretty like that song is it's one of those songs that legit makes me kind of worry about his mental health. But like the fact that he kind of follows it up with like so much more, and like some moments on it that are a little more hopeful, it definitely it kind of cools down from that just straight up like because like in the a lot of the stuff in the middle I think is easily the most revealing stuff on the entire LP. And the features on this album are like nearly all of them I think really added something to this album that I think is really essential. Like Beanie Siegel's verse on like Lockload, for example, is like he's almost kind of whispering it, and like hearing him just be like low, like over top that beat is like it's crazy. And then like Lil Wayne was fantastic on Tear Gas.
Yes.
And also like Wild Chapters is like, yeah, I was pleasantly surprised how good T.I. sounded on that song. But for me, the cherry on top is the chorus, which is Novel did the chorus and also did a little verse, but just like his whole "I'm so bright all day," his vocals are beautiful on that song. And then like as you would expect with the track with Westside and Benny on it, all three of them is like anytime all three of them are on a song, it's usually going to be really good in terms of all the different vibes they bring, and still kind of keep up a kind of consistent theme. And then also I do want to highlight that the I am not super well versed when it comes to Jill Scott, but like Jill Scott like kind of did what Novel did, where it's like she delivered a really good verse and also like has that really beautiful singing near the end. And there's even an appearance from like Conway's mother at the end, which is like the perfect heart-wrenching way to end this album. And like and like and even hear like an AKG machine like beeping, and then it like just go near the end, and I was just like, damn,
Yeah.
that is an ending for this album. So it's not really a concept album, but it definitely is like he went for his debut for Shady Records, he went all out, but not necessarily in the obvious way. Like even though getting Rick Ross and Lil Wayne on your album, that's a pretty big deal. He went all out and just, I'm gonna really weigh in on like how like terrible certain moments of my life have been and how they've kind of shaped who I am to this day. Uh, and yeah, I think it's a fantastic album. For me, the only two songs that like didn't really click are like the Babas, the track Babas. Even though I really like the spoken word at the beginning, it just sort of the structure was really weird to me. It felt a little half finished. Also, like I love Tear Gas for the most part. Rick Ross, I think, felt didn't necessarily need to be on there. He was just sort of thrown on at the end, even though the verse itself I think is really good. He just like honestly, maybe they had a stronger hook. and maybe just made Lil Wayne the only feature, it probably would have been one of my favorite songs on here. But really, other than that, I think this is my favorite hip hop album of the year so far. It's just, yeah, it's just that good. But my yeah, but my next record, my next two albums, these are the big ones that we're going to talk about. Like and I am calling it. I think both these albums, these are like my top two of the year so far. Where my next album is my second favorite, and the final album is my first favorite. But I think we should now that we've covered the hip hop elephant in the room with Conway, I think we should get into the post rock elephant in the room. Our boys, Black Country New Road, with Ants from Up There. So this was an album I was very excited to hear, like super excited, because like their debut album, I definitely do. I think that album got a little overhyped, maybe a little bit, but still I did really like that album, and I definitely think it showed a lot of potential, and that's why I dug it so much. Because like because they definitely they very much stood out to me, and a lot of that had to do with Isaac Wood as a songwriter and as a vocalist, which leads me to like, you know, when he honestly, when I heard he was departing from the band, I was just like, I wasn't like super upset or anything. I was just more like, wow, really? Like, you know, that what a way to create a bit of drama during the same week you're releasing this album that like all of us have been waiting for. So the fact that he left the band, and he's like part of the reason why they're like so unique, as well as like obviously the way that they blend post-punk with a bit of jazz and klezmer. And in the case of this album, they definitely turn more into like this like kind of sprawling proggy emo band on this album. But yeah, it's but really my point is the fact he left the band didn't necessarily make me any less excited to hear this album. And hearing the singles, it definitely was clear that this was going to be even more dense and ambitious than their debut. And turns out the album ended up being that way. And it's just like emotionally potent songwriting paired with post-rock instrumentation that yeah, in a funny way, it kind of reminds me of this album actually kind of reminds me of Funeral era Arcade Fire, in terms of like these instrumentals like have there's definitely more of a Baroque leaning sound to this album, which
yes,
with I mean like the way the piano sound and the way they incorporate like the strings and the stacks and everything is like,
it's not as much in your face either. Like it's definitely an album where like you kind of have to be patient with it, because I think a lot of the stuff comes when like you need it. Like it's not, and that's why I was so fascinated that I really love this album, because with Black Midi, those are the two bands I kind of think of. And with Black Midi, I thought their debut was fine, but I was like, I feel like they can make something better. And then their follow-up album was bananas. So I didn't, now obviously this is not the same thing. Like this album, it's not bananas in that sort of way, but their first record was good. But then I was hearing all the stuff about this album and I was super excited, and maybe my expectations were a little not met, but it was, I think, only because I wasn't ready, because I think the opening, I'm like, oh, blah, 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 blah. I was like, okay, like this is already so much more like intense. But then a lot of the album kind of is a little bit like it's more, like you said, it's more dense, and it kind of comes and goes, and you get little things here and there, and it's not always like in your face. You kind of have to be patient with it. And that's why I found this album so fascinating, because it's very meticulous and there's little things that happen throughout it. And then the performance is so great. Performances and yeah, it's definitely an album that kind of, if you stay with it, it gives you a lot of really fascinating things, because yeah, it makes their previous album look so small compared to this. And then with Black Midi, it makes their debut not seem as crazy. And then their second album is so bananas.
Oh yeah, like and also like the way this album is sequenced of like the first half is like some of the shorter songs, so you get like the
Mhm.
intro at the beginning, and then you get Chaos Space Marine, which is like
Yep.
and it's like just a very punchy 3 minutes in a way, and then they followed up with Concord and Bread Song, which yes are definitely slower building sort of pieces, and then like Goodwill Hunting, which is one of my favorite tracks on here, and then like Haldern, like that song is nuts, just like the way it turns from this very beautiful, like somewhat kind of like progressive folk rock into like this like section. There's this section at the end where we literally get a sudden tempo or like meter change where it's like and then it's like like wild. And then like the second half is like all the like epic longer songs, and like we have Mark's theme, which is like this absolutely lovely sax and piano interlude, and then like the place where he inserted the blade is like
That's
that.
probably one of my favorite songs on the album. I think the way that song is put together is like genius. I love that song. That's a great
Oh
song.
yeah, it's fantastic. I love it. And then like they follow it up with Snow Globes, which I would somewhat have to agree with Anthony that the song overall is really great. But like the jazz drum break they bring in there, they kind of mix that a bit too loud. And like that was definitely the one moment where I remember listening to this album for the first time, and like it got to that song, and then I hear the like in that part, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is kind of different. But like other than that, I think that song is amazing. But that 12-minute closer, though, that shit is like, I'm going to go out on a limb and say Basketball Shoes may be my favorite track of 2022 so far. Like, that is like, I mean, the build is a little slow, but like once it like gets into that progression and then just like that transition into like din, 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 like, yeah, I'm curious. Do you get somewhat of an Idols vibe from that part? Like,
I could
in,
see that, because I'm trying to remember, because isn't it like kind of, oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember really hard. It reminds me of like more early Idols, because it's definitely not as like compressed as like their following couple records are, when they've been kind of making it more like in your face and punchy. But
yeah,
like it's kind of like that whole like Colossus thing, where like Colossus kind of has that slow build to it, and it has the intensity building to it. I
yeah,
mean, it makes sense, because like you said, there's a lot of punk elements on here. And like I know Idols and them, they're kind of, obviously they're not from the same area, but like, you know, they're both over there in the UK, kind of bringing very interesting styles that we know, but in a way that's very different and unique. Um,
yeah,
so
yeah.
I could
But,
see
but, but,
that.
but yeah, just like that ending is like so crazy. It's like Isaac is like straight up yelling, and like everyone's going insane, and there's like these huge group vocals, and then it literally ends another thing about it that reminds me of Idols is the way that song dissolves into everyone just like screaming, and like the instrumentation just like like going out with a bang. Like it reminds me of Rottweiler, which is like the last track off Idol's Joy is an Act of Resistance record, where it was the band jamming, and then it was Joe going like burn it, ruin it, and then like everyone's just like ah, like, yeah, and it's insane. Like, yeah, that's kind of that's in a weird way, this song, I know some people have kind of complained that the song is a bit too long and that it isn't the best send off for the album, but I don't know what they're thinking because, like, yeah, because that ending is that is iconic, and this album I think is kind of iconic too. And really, the last thing I can say is Isaac, I hope you get better soon. I hope
Yes.
that things go well for you. And I could definitely see him maybe continuing to make music going forward, just not with Black Country New Road. And I'm like, the fact that they like canceled all their tour dates, I'm really interested to hear what they do going forward. Like, are they going to have another vocalist? Are they going to become more of an instrumental act? Yeah, I'd be fine with them being more of an instrumental act, given how well they like work with their instruments and like building progressions and like creating little melodies, and like you said, just how meticulous they are. And like if they try to bring in another vocalist, it'd be interesting to see how that goes, because it just no one can really hold a candle to Isaac in terms of a vocalist for this band. But yeah, at least they gave us this fantastic album that I think is easily one of the best albums of the year. But my final album, I think maybe my favorite album of the year so far, and it's another kind of big album that kind of makes their other albums feel a little small by comparison. But it's the new Big Thief record, Dragon, New Warm Mountain, I Believe in You, which that title is a mouthful, which is weird because
It's long like the album.
the album itself is actually kind of a mouthful. This, in a weird way, with me going into this album, obviously, I may have said this in a couple other videos. I was a Big Thief fan already before hearing this album, and I definitely think Two Hands was like leagues ahead of UFOF, the other album they put out in 2019, in terms of like writing and performances and everything like that. But in an interesting way, I didn't come into this album with the same degree of skepticism that maybe some people did. And I think definitely my bias towards Big Thief and like me loving them so much before this album kind of contributes to like, I wasn't going into this like, oh no, do I have to sit through 80 minutes of it? It was more like, I was interested to hear how they would approach this sort of formula and how they would be able to keep my attention the whole time. So basically, I was just like, okay, 80-minute Big Thief album, bring it on, let's have it. Like, and this album I think is easily their best album in terms of like, it's very eclectic and experimental for them, which obviously that's kind of what you would expect from big double albums like this.
And I would say, unlike, and I know I already told you this, but unlike the Beach House record, which I don't think the Beach House record's bad. I actually like it. And I don't think it's like completely, like, I don't think the Beach House record completely sounds like one sound. But I thought that album felt a lot more samey. And I think what I appreciated about this album was, I do think it's still long. I get it. I guess I'm in the same camp as you, as I'm biased. Certain artists, I don't care if their album's long, but for this, it was like, I think when it gets to the middle, I'm kind of like, okay, but the album has a really nice flow to it. And like you were saying, it's all over the place in a good way. Like, I feel like there's never a moment where I'm like, that's kind of random. There's certain sounds they go for that weren't for me. Like, I think early on, there was a more kind of 808-y sounding song. And I was kind of like, this sounds a little weird for them. But I think they do a lot of really fascinating things where I think UFOF was a little more was kind of like, "Eh." And then Two Hands was just kind of like you said, it was a little more aggressive and in your face. This album, I think, kind of just goes all over the place where it's like there's kind of fun in your face folk stuff. Then there's kind of like really cool rock elements. Then there's like the kind of more slow acoustic-y stuff. It definitely has a bit of a mixture on here where I appreciate it more because then you get more sounds from it. So you're not just kind of like it's one thing. It gives you a little bit more of a variety to listen to.
Oh yeah. I mean, you basically said a lot of what I was going to say, but like, but I can definitely be a little more specific in terms of like the different sounds they work with here. I mean, they go they go like hard country, for example, on like Spud Infinity or like Red Moon, which I love both those songs. Both those songs are a lot of fun. Um, Blurred View has this kind of interesting trip hop sort of sound to it. Like it sounds very eerie and kind of it sounds very lo-fi in terms of the way it's kind of assembled and mixed. And just like on top of that, we have like the I sing for you. Like yeah, that it's the those little melodies that like Adrian sings on that song just get stuck in my head. Or even like now that I think about it, Wake Me Up to Drive kind of has that sort of sound to it because it's like I would have never thought to combine like that 808 with like that accordion and just like that like yeah that just kind of chunky guitar but they make it work so well. And speaking of kind of chunky guitars, we have some kind of bluesy moments like Love Love Love, for example, is like yeah, it has that sort of jug band sound to it. And so does like Time Escaping, which is one of those songs that like it sounds clunky but in a good way. It's like just the way the guitars is like it sounds like they literally just took a bunch of found objects in a junkyard and like made their own sort of instruments and like put them through amps, and it's just like this down 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 and just like and like the vocals are like time escaping, like yeah it's like you wouldn't think to meld all these like sounds together, but it works really well. Or like they kind of there's a bit of shoegaze in there too, like Flower of Blood sort of. I agree with Anthony's whole thing about like how the song is like it's what you would expect from Big Thief in terms of like kind of that folky sort of Americana-ish rock sound, but like it sounds so psychedelic, like and trippy. Like it's one of those albums you could just either just chill out to, or you could like try out some sort of like or you could like try out some sort of like really good drug and just kind of space out to it in a way, like it has that sort of like loose jam band sort of vibe to it. And the weird thing about this album is for an 80-minute album that has no concept and no sort of like thematic thread to it, it still comes together in a very cohesive way with like great songwriting. And also, unlike the Beach House album, this doesn't feel like an 80-minute album. It feels more like it kind of feels half its length, like Anthony said in his review, of like it's of like it definitely takes you on a journey, but it doesn't make me feel like I've been just sitting in a chair for like 80 minutes in a way. It's this very smooth, sort of relaxed kind of vibe that this album has. And like and it's the kind of laid back album for the most part, but it still like has moments like Little Things, for example, like, and friggin' Anthony said that was the weakest song in the album, which doesn't make much sense to me because I think that may be my second favorite song on the album, because my personal favorite is Simulation Swarm. Just like it's a song that, like, I may not remember the lyrics word for word, but I still remember that progression of like da 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 da. Like, yeah, like it's stuck in my head, and like Adrian's vocals are great, and also that bam 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 bam, like, yeah, that guitar solo, like all the little guitar timbres they work into this album are like so eclectic, and like you'll either get some really sort of light kind of acoustics or just like straight up chunky, just like thick thick electrics on this album. Like, yeah, the oh my god, it's like I didn't expect that I would be gushing over just guitar textures for like 3 minutes as I'm talking about this album. But yeah, like I love this album. It's definitely the one album I've heard this year where I can't really, besides Black Country, where there's not really a single song that I would skip. And you know, this is coming from someone who I generally don't like to skip songs on an album, even the ones that I'm really not into, because they probably add something interesting to the album or anything. And it's like it's really rare that on an album that I really like, or well, like on an album I really love, where I run into that song where I'm like, oh goodness no. But yeah, this record's fantastic. I can't say enough good things about it.
You know, I think a good way to kind of end this podcast is for me to say, remember how last year I always had those conversations with you about like, yeah, like I'm not feeling it, or like I feel like I need more stuff to listen to because I haven't so far we are already almost to April, and with music and with movies this year, even if I don't love everything, I feel like this year has given me so much more like that's good. Like I'm going to take that and listen to it. Like I feel like there's been a lot of really solid releases, and I don't know if it's because like people have been kind of working through quarantine, um or if it's just kind of like, you know, certain albums have came out already and now they're kind of jumping back in with other albums. But yeah, solid year so far. We're getting a lot of really cool bold albums, and there's a lot to listen to, and it's been great. So
Oh yeah, because like I remember telling you, like I don't think 2021 was necessarily like a meh music year, but it definitely was weird for me, especially since I will say one thing about 2022. I'm definitely getting a lot more albums that I'm just like loving right out of the gate. Whereas
mhm.
last year it was like there's some albums that there's a lot of albums that like didn't necessarily click with me right away, but like the more time I spent with them, the more I was like, no, these are actually really good. Like,
Yeah.
uh, I mean, there are a few exceptions, because I will say a lot of the albums that made it into my top 10 are definitely ones that right out of the gate I was like, yeah, okay, I dig these. These are good. Like, yeah, so I guess it kind of makes more sense that those are the albums that ended up being the highest for me on my list.
Yeah, like I
But
think this has definitely been a year so far where, like you said, I think the albums that I at least like, it doesn't feel like with Big Thief, I really like that album, but that's not an album I go back to like that, which is fine because I don't think every album you love or really like should be albums that like you're constantly going back to, because I feel like there's certain albums where you're kind of like, I think this is really good,
yeah,
but it's not an album that like, you know, you're going back to constantly, but you still feel like it's a good album. So far this year, a lot of the albums that I've been hearing are ones that I'm genuinely like picking pieces of and listening to. I Last year was rare, the amount of albums that I kept going back to. This year I already have more like these, like there's been Big Thief stuff I've been going back to, my 3 albums I've been going back to, the Black Country I've been going to a few songs here and there. Like I feel like there's more of those albums that I'm like going back to.
yeah.
But yeah, welcome to season 3 of What's on Repeat. It's exciting, it's going to be new, it's going to be fresh. We talked way longer than when we had more music to talk about, but it's okay because we had all these albums that we listened to. If you like these albums, tell us what you think of them. Leave them in the comments below, all that stuff. If you have your own albums or singles, Like, comment, subscribe. Go follow Josh on stuff. He's the big music critic here. I'm just a schlub. And I hope you guys liked it. You know, go subscribe to his channel, subscribe to mine if you enjoyed it. Any last words?
Well, go listen to all these albums, and hopefully you really like them, and don't let these albums slip through the cracks. Like, don't miss them. Like, give them a listen. Like, you may like them, you may not, but like, either way, please, I recommend giving these albums your time, especially Big Thief and Black Country New Road. Like, those are the two that's like, these are the albums of 2022, like, right there.
Hey, Joshua, you gotta slow down, partner. We still got 9 months left. You know, anything could happen. We gotta set. I was gonna try and think of a joke. I was trying to think of an artist that you were gonna look at me and roll your eyes at, but I can't think of any right now. Maybe Oliver Tree will come out with another album. That'll be album of the year.
Oh yeah, and hopefully it ends up being better than the one we've gotten so far.
Well, bye everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Channel BK. Peace out, everyone. It's been good.